Before we start the show properly, I just wanted to put a private message here. If you want to skip ahead to the show, feel free. It's about 30 or 45 seconds in, I'm sure. For those of you who have seen social media accounts, then this isn't news to you, but for regular listeners, you may have heard me talking about being due a child. Unfortunately, on March 10th, baby Jackson was born with no heartbeat. Obviously, this has rocked our world a little bit. I want to say thank you for everyone who showed some support. It was truly appreciated. And this episode's partly late because of that. We've been surprised with how many people have been through something similar. And, our heart goes out to all you guys as well. And the support we got from various charities in the NHS was fantastic. But we'll leave that there and we'll come and start the show. Hello and welcome to episode 130 of The Imperial Truth. I'm Greg, it's just me for the show today. Well, for the first part, we do have Michael coming on and we talk about Saturnine. It is, we explain how we do it. Essentially, it's a spoiler-free review and chat about the book, which does go on for a considerable amount of time without spoiling stuff. So if you are going to read it and you don't want anything, then jump ahead and have a listen. We discuss how we're going to do that at the start of that piece. I think it's pretty good actually. So I'd tell you to go and listen to that if you're on the fence. Before we jump into anything else though, let's talk about Element Games. So everything's shut at the moment, obviously. Element Games are still going. They still have some stock. They are still posting out stock. Obviously their supplies in are limited, so you might not be able to get exactly what you want at the moment, and that's a problem we're all going to face. If you do want to support them, still. There are ways and means of doing that. Obviously, still buy the stuff you can buy. But there is a good idea, and I also think it's a good idea for people who have a set budget for hobby toys. It's easy. It's got to be done. We are in times where some people's finances are very much up in the air, and I appreciate that. If you do have the money, one thing you can do is buy vouchers. This is something that's being put out there a lot. It does a couple of things. It allows you to support a business, and it's a tricky one. I believe in supporting the businesses that you believe in. So I'm not suggesting that people go and put money into Element if they don't want to. I think people have to provide the service that you need. But the other thing it can do is it can help you with a budget, which means the money doesn't get lost. But it also just builds up a nice little pot as well, even if it's only something like £10 in there. That's all credit that you can then use going forwards. As I say, it's nothing's simple at the moment, but Element will be going the other side of this, and having a nice stock of money might be useful, bearing in mind that we're going to get a shed load of toys coming out. It's not clear exactly how Games Workshop are going to work with that, but I can see them accelerating the release schedule a bit, because if they don't, then you're going to be a long period of time for some of the game systems to not receive anything. So although I don't think we'll get a flood of stuff, I think we'll get the maybe an acceleration of some of the different systems. So when they release an Age of Sigmar main release for whatever they're doing, they might put a little bit more in there than they would, how they split up a release over 3 or 4 weeks. But then they also might have alongside that, so Adeptus Titanicus or some Necromunda, and just do that. So having a little stockpile of money in there could actually be quite a nice little thing as well, so you don't feel like, to get your army, you're piling in a load of money. Obviously, no pressure on people to do that as well. People, if the finances are tight, if you're worried about what's going to happen, make sure you're all right first. Toy soldiers are toy soldiers at the end of the day. One thing I will say about Element, I can't remember if I said this last episode or not, but if you're going to use the link that's in the show notes or the advertisement banner on the website, basically you have to order. So I've had friends put an order in an Element, get it all in their trolley, as it were, their cart, and then go, oh, I forgot to use the link, come out, use the link to go in, and basically that doesn't seem to work all the time. So if you want to support the show, it's only if you want to support the show, if you click that link before you start adding anything to your cart, then I don't know if then that works. I don't know if it's a problem with just the system and needs a little tweak or two or what have you, but just for doing that, because I know some people message me and say, I've used your link, cheers. And if someone wants to do that and money doesn't come through, then actually, it's disappointing for them. So just a little trick on that one. And a shout out for Geek Shield, the insurance. We should have an advert in here. I'm trying to get Pete to do it, but head on over to Geek Shield on Facebook if you want some life insurance. Basically, times like these, it makes you think sometimes. Sadly, but Pete is all about making sure that if you have insurance, it is the right one for you. We had him on the show, and he explicitly spoke about people having insurances where they thought they were getting X amount of money, and it turns out they're pretty likely to get zero. And if you're paying for something, then you want it to, you want whatever you're paying for to be there for when you need it. So, head on over to Geek Shield and have a chat to Pete about all that kind of stuff. But all that's done, right? Getting into the show. So it's just me. I thought I was going to be furloughed. Our company is looking like it's trying to push through. We do qualify. We're not just trying to ignore advice. We do a service. So I am currently working, and if the owner of the business has his way, we'll be working all the way through. Whether that happens or not, who knows? That depends on a huge host of things. So actually, having come back to work, I've got, pretty much the same amount of time as I used to have. So it's been a bit more difficult to try and get things done, and with everything that's been going on as well. Obviously, when I've been at home, been spending a bit more time doing other things. Haven't hobbied much and stuff, and all the things that are less important get pushed aside, and that's understandable. This is why this episode's late as well. But we're going to try and get on track. Also, some of the chats we were going to have, the discussion with Kat and Caleb from CK Studios, a lot of that was about what they're up to this year, and obviously what they're up to this year has changed a hell of a lot. They were coming over for Warhammer Fest and doing a lot with CK Studios, and they've got other plans now, but we decided to push that back so we can chat when there's actually more specific stuff to chat about. So yeah, it's all part of the fun. What we have had in these last few weeks is with the Adepticon being cancelled, they've moved all the previews to online, and I'm recording after the second one, so we've still got one to come the week after Easter. But these give you a little clue. If you haven't been to somewhere where they've done one of these previews, these give you a little insight into how they work. They're not quite the same, because of the nature of doing it online versus doing it over the internet. They obviously can't do the questions and answers. We had, was it on the second one, they had 40,000 viewers, which is, really good. Obviously, it's a marquee kind of show for them to do. Opening up the Twitch chat was, well, we'll get into that, but yeah, it was, it didn't allow them to do the question and answers, which, frankly, for the whole period of time they do the questions and answers at shows, maybe one or two questions are relevant and give mean some information is forthcoming. Most of them are, when is this happening, or why, when are you going to do that, and what's out next. It's questions that aren't going to be answered, so we don't lose a huge amount by that. In fact, I think with the second show what they did was they delved a little bit more into the background of some of the releases that are upcoming a little bit more to fill that void, but they're getting better at what they do. They're adjusting, and I think they're doing a good job with that. And the people who are at those levels tend to be a little bit more enthused. One thing it does do, so if you went to Adepticon and you watched the show, you'd have maybe Ben Johnson and Pete Foley and Eddie would be up talking about these things. And, yep, they know their stuff. And they might have the 40k guy, I can't remember his name now, and they know their stuff about their game systems. When it comes to things like Heresy, they might have slightly less background information. The way they're doing it on the Twitch chat means you're getting that specific person, which means there is that information right there. Whether it's Andy Smiley talking about the media side of things, whether it's Andy Hoare talking about something, whether it's the designer talking, whoever it is there for their specific subject. So that's quite a nice aspect of it. I know that a group of my friends, Michael and Howard and a few guys, we jumped on a Zoom chat so we could all silently watch the videos together but then have little discussions in and around that, which was quite nice, bit of a sense of community, let's say during times of isolation. So I've really enjoyed doing them. Things that we should shout out that have happened. So first off, it's actually a non-GW thing. Death of Hope. You can find this on Facebook and on YouTube. A Heresy film, I suppose. It's impressive. This is the work of one person, I believe. A lot of blood, sweat and tears have gone into this and generated a lot of chat online. I like it. I think everyone should go and check it out. I think there's a strong try-hardness about it, and I've seen some other people say the same thing and receive a lot of pushback. But I think it's clear that there's a real try-hard to be old school, and even some of the wording used by him, although backtrack on it, is a little bit it's a little bit unashamed in its kind of unsoiled GW before it got too clean and pretty, which I think it's a bit of an overstretching of things. I think people misunderstand that a little bit, but it's certainly impressive. I think it's one of those things where it needs to be judged once everything's out, because for me it lacked certain pieces, but I think it jumped around a lot. I think there were a few issues with the story and pacing. As I say, I think there was a try-hard level of trying to be overly dark and gritty, and it maybe went a shade too far on that artistically. But some people are going to love that and some people aren't, and that's as simple as that. That's a stylistic kind of choice. But go and check it out if you haven't yet. I would advise people to check it out if you haven't, because it's a seriously impressive piece of work when you consider how it's made. And fair play to the guy. A lot of people screaming out for GW to grab him to make stuff. I don't know how long it takes him. I'm also not sure. I don't know the guy, but it would be interesting to see if there even could be an accord between them and GW to see what's going on. But with the announcement of all the media kind of growth from Storyforge, which is GW's kind of arm for that now, which can be found on Instagram. You can go and look up Warhammer Storyforge. It looks like they've got a number of different styles that they're doing. So we've got Death's Hand, Angels of Death, and Death's Hand was the video they showed. Obviously, some of these are 40k or whatever, but there's a lot going on there. They're trying to appeal to a lot of different audiences, which is the right thing to do. So not everything is going to be to everyone's taste, and that's understandable. So I think the best place to follow is Warhammer Storyforge. Of course, if you want any information from GW, almost all of it first comes out via Warhammer Community. That's what they built that portal for. If you're on Bell of Lost Souls or wherever, if you find something out about from this podcast, another podcast, the chances are that information is already on Warhammer Community. That should be, if you're interested in Games Workshop information, Warhammer Community should be the first place you go. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to what they do with Warhammer Storyforge. As I say, it looks like there's a decent amount of projects going on, which is nice to see. And really stretching their arm with it, which is cool. And it might be a little while off before we get anything officially out, but it'll be interesting to see how they distribute as well. Because obviously there are lots of different ways to go about doing these things now. But which one's right and which one's wrong, who knows? Who knows? We did actually get a couple of new releases before GW shut down. We had the Morbius, the Aquita Bombard, Morbius Heavy Bombard. Interesting, thanks. So this is the third and final for now version of the Aquita loadouts. We talked about the Graviton Charge Cannon and the Spicular rocket system. The Heavy Bombard can fire a Strength 10 AP2 Ordnance 1 barrage large blast shot at 24 inches. That's not bad. It's not to be messed with. We still got all the issues. It's only 24-inch range, and the tank itself can also fire carcass shells. So 24 inches, Strength 2 AP4 Ordnance barrage blast, large blast, flesh plane, ignores cover and pinning. There's a lot of kind of discussion about when is it worth firing the carcass shells as opposed to the explosive shells. Pretty limited occasions, I think, where you're going to fire that. Essentially against anything. Against anything that's got a 4+ armor save and is in cover. And that's pretty much it. At Strength 10, you are instant killing almost everything else. See, if it wasn't Strength 10, if it was below that, there could be an argument that it's good against some of the Mechanicum units. It causes pinning. Pinning's it's an interesting one. It's useful when it happens, but it's nothing to be relied upon, and that's the problem with any kind of rule like that. Even in some of the armies that you use it against that might have a 4+ armor save can actually have better morale than Space Marines due to the quirks of how Foxes and things like that work. But yeah, if you've got a big group of dudes in terrain and you can hit all 10 of them with that, and they've only got a 4+ armor save, then you're probably going to kill them with carcass shells, where you're probably not with explosive shells. But it's such a finite kind of existence in which the carcass shells rules are actually better than just unloading a Strength 10 shot. I mean, the good thing is you don't have to choose before the game. You can just have them on there. And make the choice as and when you go. Interesting to see that all these weapon options are the same points. So you buy the Aquita and you just select which weapon you want for it. I think the explosive shells might be the best kind of the best in quotation marks options for it. But then I think it's been noted by many people that if you're going to do that, you might as well take one of the there's other options for getting Strength 10 large blasts that don't have to drive up the table, be within 24 inches. Personally, I like the spicular rockets, spicular missiles, spicular rocket system. I think if you've got the right type of army, then being able to hit multiple units, doing a decent number of hits is a potentially powerful thing. If you know that your opponent likes to kind of turtle up in an area, then this forces them to spread out, much like putting down a large blast that can do a lot of damage, or multiple large blasts that can do a lot of damage. This forces them to spread out. This forces them to spread out even more, because it's not just individual models in a unit; they have to spread out their units. So, although it does, it's Strength 7 AP3. Doing 5 hits if you're firing the 5-inch template. 7-inch obviously is the one that allows you that little bit more spreading out. But there are armies that like to have their units grouped close together, even if the models are slightly spread out, to avoid that kind of thing. So it expands kind of the area that those units take up, and you can utilise that if you're hitting one flank of those. All of a sudden, if you're hitting Unit A on the right flank, and there's Unit B in the middle, and Unit C is on the left flank of that aspect, then if you're putting this down, they might have to be further away than normal. That might allow you to control how they then assault you, things like that. There are ways to use it. Overall, the tank is good. I don't think it's anything better than good. I think it has issues. 140 points base. What do you get for that? 2 sponsor mounted heavy bolters, and the main tank comes with smoke launchers, searchlight, auxiliary drive. Yeah, are there better options? Probably, but we'll see what they do with this. I say, I do think that Spicular rocket system has potential to be showing off a style of rules that we could lean on going forwards, and maybe it's a test of that. What else did we get? Oh yeah, we had the Knights Cenobium released. Every time, I know some people think these are a bit busy. Every time I look at them, I just think they're fantastic. Forge World, as we get on to the next thing, Forge World seem to have managed to really nail the Dark Angels. They just look fantastic. Right from the start with the Interemptors, all the way through to these guys, they're really tempting, actually, and I think that's happened to a lot of people inside and outside the 30k community. They've nailed it. They've absolutely nailed it, and that goes through the other models we see as well. We've got the companions that were shown off in the Road to Thramas 4. Trying to remember I don't think we talked about these last time. I think the episode came out just before. But we've got the finest warriors from the Deathwing, the companions. They've taken an oath to lay down their lives before letting harm come to one they are tasked to protect. So, yeah, they're essentially a bodyguard unit. They have their armor. The contention was caused with their armor. They have anywhere they've jumped in to take a death blow. They basically mark that honor by painting that part of their armor bone white, which I think is a really awesome idea. There is an argument to be made that the unit can look a little bit messy because of that. Aesthetically, I completely understand that. I see it. I don't know if I agree with it, but I'm not sure yet. It's one of those ones where I think you see it on the table and make your mind up. And you don't have to do that at the end of the day. You can paint them how you want with respect on that. The complaints that this is where the Deathwing didn't paint their armor white until they I can never remember the name of the planet, but they had the issue with the Gene Stealers and they painted their armor in the ash of the dead and all that stuff. It's those two things don't have to be exclusive. Painting your whole armor white is different than painting one piece of armor white repeatedly over various parts. But also, that's very old law on the Deathwing being painted white. Whether it's current canon or not, I don't know. I've said it before. I will say it again. Everything, Games Workshop, their law is absolute until it's not. And even when it's absolute, it's absolute from a point of view. So, everything's true until it's not. They have the ability to go back and change things, but they have the ability also to go back and just put doubt on things as well. But even if a certain event happens, just because Deathwing paint all their armor white because of one event, it doesn't mean that they couldn't have painted bits of their armor white before. Plus, also, it's a 10,000 year period between the two. Knowledge gets lost, so everything we look at from a 40k point of view must be filtered through a lens of lack of information. How many times do I read something the other day? Apparently, malaria was rife in the UK before it was the UK, but back a few thousand years ago, malaria was rife over here. We don't think of England as ever having a malaria problem. So, all of a sudden, yes, we did, but that doesn't mean the people were wrong before. They were working off the information they were working off. So that's a very bad analogy, but it was the one that stuck in my head. I'm too tired to work through good ones. I do apologise. The models look good. The models look fantastic. As I say, they're companions. They've got companions in that they can challenge like champions, which is or accept challenges at least. I can't remember which one it is. And then there's signs of the Deathwing as well. So they get any model with a special rule may re-roll the first failed hit roll of any phase while engaged in a challenge. So that's not bad. In fact, as we talk about them, I think I remember talking about them last time, but hey ho, we talked about them again. They're great. They're absolutely great. On to the other Dark Angels release we saw. We saw through the preview, then Road to Thramas 5 gave us some rules as well. The Lion. There were rumours about him coming. I was a little bit surprised at the way they released him on a preview like that, but then with a lack of Weekender, maybe it would have been kind of set in for a Weekender reveal. I did wonder if they would leave it back for a Warhammer Fest reveal, but maybe they've got more to show us then. I know that when Sanguinius was being worked on, Sam Egan or Simon Egan, he goes by Sam or Simon, just because that might people who don't know might be confused by that. He had been studying Jagatai's armour. I remember having a couple of conversations with him about the influences that he would use on Jagatai. At some point, the Lion has overtaken Jagatai in the queue for whatever reason. Maybe they felt they needed to release something with the book and get that out. But, I mean, whatever. We've got the Lion here. He looks splendid. His base looks splendid. There's some, for people who don't like scenic bases, there's some models there to use for other armies. Give away to your Night Lords friends. The pose is no nonsense. The Lion, really. I think it's fantastic. The armour is busy enough without being over busy. A really interesting choice that we've got. So we've got two weapons options here, which is something obviously they've decided they can do, which I know people like Primarchs like Dawn. There was a desire to give Dawn weapon options, which never happened, but maybe with the success of Sanguinius and the way they did that, maybe that's come down into the Lion. Maybe they always felt like the Lion needed two weapon options for the rules and for the model, but we've got a helmet and helmetless heads, which again is something we all wanted on the others, and maybe we will see something else going forwards. Maybe they'll I don't know how they'll do a heads pack for helmets pack for the others, but you never know. And we've got the Lion Sword and the Wolf Blade on there as well, so you can have your choice of different ones of those. I think it's quite interesting. A number of people, I've seen people saying this is their favourite Primarch, and it does look fantastic. Once we get the full 360-degree shots, I'm really going to look forwards to looking at him. I do think he looks amazing, and he's definitely up there. I think helmeted is just phenomenal. I think helmeted with Lion Blade is the way I would build him as a model. Not to say that because the head is really good. It's one of the better heads. Heads are always difficult. Faces are always difficult to do. I think it looks glorious, but I think the helmet looks fantastic. And I don't like painting chainsaw blades, so that's probably why I'd go with the Lion Blade. But it's up there. It's up there. Personally, for me, I think Ferris is still my number one. But yeah, it's amazing. Yes, I really can't wait to see it in person. When Warhammer World opens up, might have to take a trip up and have a look at it on the shelf, because it's amazing. We did get his stats, as I said. So weapon skill 8, a bit of a surprise for some people that he's not weapon skill 9. Strength 7. He's a strong old boy. Toughness 6, wounds 6, initiative 7, 5 attacks, leadership 10, and a 2+ save. So yeah, not too shabby there. And we've got some of his rules. So when he's reduced to 4 wounds or less, he gets +1 attack, increased to +2 attacks when down to 2 wounds or less. I do think people maybe put a bit much into this, in that he must be dying for this to happen. So 4 wounds or less, he's lost 2 wounds. Yeah, that +1 attack is nice. I think that's the one you rely on. A lot of times Primarchs just don't get taken down, or if they do, there's a lot of like their squad gets taken down, and then a lot of shots get put into them, and they can actually go a little bit quicker than people think. The +2 attacks were reduced to 2 wounds or less. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a nice bonus to have. It's not something I'd be relying on, because if you're down to 2 wounds or less and you need those attacks, you're in trouble. One nice thing is he's renowned for his combat prowess. He doesn't stand out. I like the words here. He's neither the exquisite duelist that Fulgrim epitomised, nor the raging berserker that was Angron, but something far more terrifying. He fought with absolute focus and chilling detachment, unstoppable in the attack and immovable in defence. And once brought to battle, he knew no other end than victory or death. So he never needs more than a 4+ to hit an enemy model, regardless of the enemy's weapon skill, any special rules or modifiers in play. So this means that there's a handful of places where this comes into play. Lehman Russ's minuses to hit. Guilliman, I think it is, isn't it? Guilliman that can reduce the weapon skill of their opponent. That's 1 or 2. There aren't many places. The probably biggest place it comes into play is with the blind special rule, or with any psychic powers. I think there might be 1 or 2 psychic powers that can do things. A good trick for a Mechanicum player is to fire at least 1 blinding shot into the big unit with the Primarch in, and hope they roll a 6 and their weapon skill goes down to 1. Even if they do, Lionel Johnson's still hitting on a 4+, so that's not bad. Again, I don't think it's the amazing rule that people think it is, but it's a nice little bonus in there. And we don't have all his rules. We have a couple of rules for him, so we don't know how it fits in with everything else. But we do have rules for the Lion Sword. So strength as user, so strength 7, AP 1, melee, lance, fleshbane, mastercrafted, and 2-handed. So at strength 7, he's going to be munching most things. At strength 7 with lance, that means any armour of any vehicles, it's going to be strength 12. So 5's to glance anything, and 6 is to go through it. Obviously, lighter tanks than that, he got a bit more chance of going through. The Wolfblade, so these are the current rules that are online, and we can only assume these are correct. The Wolfblade is +3 strength. Oh, and if you do get that penetrating hit with the Lion Sword, +2 for the AP 1 is nice. The Wolfblade, +3 strength, AP 2. So hitting at strength 10. Melee, 2-handed, shred, fearsome ruin. So if we ignore fearsome ruin for a second, strength 10 AP 2 means your so the Lion Sword, anything armor value 12 or over, you're glancing on a 5, you're penetrating on a 6, and you're getting +2 to the roll once you're through. The Wolfblade, you're strength 10, so armor 11, you're penetrating on a 2, armor 12, you're penetrating on a 3, and armor 14, you're penetrating on a 5. So you are more likely to penetrate with the Wolfblade in every circumstance, pretty much. The only time it doesn't go up is when you go up to armor value 15, which is extremely rare. And yeah, I don't know. If you're playing many Warlord Titans, then maybe being able to hit on a 4+ and having a Lion Sword is half decent. Generally, combat is not the way to deal with those things. The Wolfblade is better at vehicles. It's strength 10 AP 2. When you're fighting normal troops or units, then AP, just as long as it's 2 or above, it doesn't make much difference. So the AP is irrelevant. the strength 7, you're going to be wounding most things on 2s. There's very few things, mechanicum stuff, big stuff like that, you're wounding on any less. Wolfblade's better at strength 3. Not only is better in fact if you're rolling 2s to wound on everything pretty much. With shred, you get to re-roll it, and you're making you auto kill stuff. Your strength 7, it's only militia, things like that you're instant deathing. At strength 10, it's custodes, it's demons, particularly after a couple of turns. It's Thalax, it's Ursarax, all those kind of things that you're instant deathing, and that makes the Wolfblade versus a unit of 5 or 6 Ursarax will do a hell of a lot of damage. The Lion Sword might kill 1 or 2. That's a big difference. And then on top of all that, you've got Fearsome Ruin for the Wolfblade. Any unit which suffers 1 or more casualties from this weapon and makes a morale check during the assault phase must roll an additional d6 for that check and keep the 2 highest dice to determine the result. So actually this is kind of a bonus, kind of a negative. You must roll. So there's no choice that this rule's being used. It is automatically used if you're using this. I think some people have maybe misunderstood this a little bit. If you're charging in with your big squad, with the Lion, a lot of the time you're going to kill whatever, he's probably going to have a bodyguard. He's going to, a lot of people, the way that a lot of people play this, you're going to make sure that whatever you go into, you're going to kill. And that's great when you're going up against things like Terminators and stuff like that. You want to make sure that you're not going to get too many hits back. The problem comes, with this Fearsome Ruin rule, it makes it harder to play the tactical assault. So this is where you charge a unit of, say, Thalax. Say you've got the Lion with the Wolfblade and a squad around him that can do a bit of damage. You're charging a decent squad of something that's stubborn or... stubborn's the main one, really, because the chances are or stubborn or very resilient, actually, is the other one. Because you might... With stubborn, it doesn't matter how many you win by. They're going to take their leadership check on their normal leadership. So something like Thalax is an 8. Maybe not the specific example, but something like that. Lots of units can be stubborn. The other thing is things Terminators with 3-up saves, some things with shields. You're not always going to get through them, and it's about winning combat, taking them down. The beauty of those units is you can use them as a speed bump to charge into, hope they stay around, which means your unit cannot get shot by, and generally shooting is the way to take these units down, and then you can be free in your own turn to then charge your next unit. With this Fearsome Ruin rule, that's going to be a little bit more difficult because 3d6 take away the lowest, essentially, for most morale checks. It's going to mean it pushes your odds beyond. So a stubborn unit at leadership 8, I don't know the odds off the top of my head, but you're much more likely not to pass that with that rule. So it's a double-edged sword. What it does mean is if you go into a squad and you win by 1 or 2 and you want to run them down because they are Terminators, if you do want to be running stuff down, then it's a bonus in that respect because that 1 or 2 leadership spike, leadership 9 down to 7, then rolling on 3d6, picking the 2 highest, all of a sudden you're a lot more likely to flee than you are. So you need to be aware when you're choosing which sword to run, of how you want to play that. 80% of the time, it's not really going to matter which sword you run. You're going to be wounding Marines on 2s, and they're not going to get their armor save. There's the Master Crafted for the Lion Sword might come in because we all know that Primarchs can roll a handful of 1s and 2s when they're trying to hit. Both options have the ability to take out tanks. Wolfblade has a little bit more, but if you're putting a squad with them, you can put melt bombs in that squad. There's things you can do. In fact, more than tanks, it's probably dreadnoughts. would lead me more towards the Wolf Blade, because a Leviathan coming in, or even a Contemptor, can come in and cause you real problems if you don't have the rest of the squad to deal with them. So, yeah, a lot of people are going to run that Wolf Blade. We don't know how many points difference is. We don't know how that's going to work, but a lot of people are going to be running that Wolf Blade. I don't think it's... in general, it looks like the better option. There are reasons not to take it, and I think sometimes people look past them. Some people might say, well, whatever, I'm talking rubbish. That's fine. You know, it almost looks a bit sad that the iconic weapon that is the Lion Sword isn't the weapon that you would go to initially to look to see if it's the one you want. You know, I would look at the points for the Wolf Blade first and see from there. So, yeah, it's interesting. But he's got the choice, which is really nice. This is Future Corrections Greg coming back to make an adjustment to recording Greg. Of course, I forgot Fleshbane was included with the Lion Swords. So against infantry, there's pretty much no difference between these weapons. Please ignore that aspect of the chat. And on top of all that, he's got a 2+ save and a 4+ invulnerable save, which can be re-rolled once per turn. So he can handle himself. It's once per turn as well. So you can stand out in front of a unit and risk taking a few high-powered shots with that. Obviously, you've got it will not die as well, and you've got lookout surge, so you can really manage what you're doing on that. And he's got a Fusel Actinaeus, an archaic plasma weapon, which has the blind special rule, by the sounds of it. So, and blind's a fantastic rule. So yeah, that's pretty good actually. So if you are the kind of person, if you want to aim your big squad at their big squad, being able to blind them before you charge in can be a real boost, because it just means, more than anything, it means you just don't take the damage back. So yeah, the Lion's looking funky. A lot of people have done the maths. There's there was a swell of feeling that he was. There's a lot of power creep and things like that. We don't know what rules he's got for buffing your army. I suspect we're going to see the main things will be the unit choices that are allowed around him. How much he buffs the rest of the army, I'm not going to be sure on that one. In combat, he does a number on a lot of Primarchs. Russ will beat him because of his blade. The Lion might get round the negatives to hit, but Russ's sword doing the extra damage will probably do it. I think Horus will do it. I think Guilliman will probably do it. Maybe Sanguinius, but he's going to beat plenty of the others. But then I don't think Primarch versus Primarch is really where you should be looking, although it looks good on the tabletop. Primarch versus Primarch fights, I don't think they tend to decide the overall fight. I think all they tend to do is bog down a huge amount of stuff in the middle of the table. And what tends to decide which Primarch wins is the unit that's with them. So it's whether your sub-unit can kill their unit and then get your Power Fist or Chain Fist attacks onto the Primarch. That's usually the best and quickest way to take down a Primarch. I can't wait to see the rest of the rules for him, because I think it's fantastic. And the Dark Angels are lining up to be an army with a lot of very cool options. We're going to get the whole Hexagrammaton to kind of play with. We got a lot of cool units in there. Got a lot of new toys. I think people are getting very excited about them at the moment. Things like the Interemptors are cool, but they will come out, kill a unit and die. I don't think there's anything like, they might have the cool weapons that allow them to come and do some real damage, but they don't seem to be overly protected. Apart from the Aegis on the companions, I think, which gives them a 4+ shooting save and a 5+ combat save. That's the only thing there that I've seen that really makes them more survivable. So I don't think they're going to be as over the top as people are making out. But anyway, yeah, the Lion looks fantastic. I'm going to look forward to seeing the Dark Angels on the table a lot more in the coming, whenever it is. the second preview they did the following week, they made a big announcement about 2 models. Essentially, we're getting Word Bearers Praetors, which is nice. So these are continuation of their little kind of dual Praetor kind of release that they've done. One in Terminator, one armor, one in power armor. The Forge World have seemed to have moved to a heavy metal style of painting, which personally I don't have a problem with. I really like that kind of clean look. We've moved away from that. It is what it is. It doesn't really hurt the models, I don't think. I think when we see people get them in their hands, you're going to see people painting them up in the more gritty, down-to-earth style. And then a lot of people are going to be able to see what they do, visualise them within their army a lot more. I think these models are fantastic. The sensor kind of mace thing on the Terminator dude is glorious. It's kind of funky. It is over the top. They've got flames. They've got candles. Yeah, it's the Word Bearers. I think they should be over the top. The power armor dude. The head is fantastic. I don't think there's much about this I don't like. The sword with the glowing effect painted up. I understand there's a stylistic difference, but I think these are fantastic, and it will be really good to see people adding them to their Word Bearers armies and doing their take on how to paint them. As I say, people who've seen my armies, I'm all for painting in between the lines, and I like the clean look, so these do fit my style quite a lot. But yeah, it's cool. We're getting, not only are we getting these models, they're showing them off beforehand. This is what we've asked for. We've asked for these previews. We've asked for a bit more care and attention, and we're getting it. And this is a release that's not Road to Thramas. You know, this is part of that. Yes, we are doing Road to Thramas. Yes, we are doing this, but don't forget, there's other stuff coming out. They told us that they will be working on Heresy. They're working on Heresy. I think it's all good, and we're going to be moving forwards. Heresy is piling on. There's a lot of cool stuff, and I believe there's a lot more cool stuff going. When we get to see the book with everything that's going on, who knows? But let's just there are bigger problems in the world to worry about. The book's coming. We're going to get it. Put your money away, and be excited for when it does drop, because we're all going to be wanting to play a lot of games, I think. In addition to all of that, carrying on talking about the current climate we're in, Black Library have started to give away sell some audiobooks on their Black Library app for 99p. They're doing one a week while this is going on. So there might not be Heresy, but if you want an audiobook for 99p, head on over to they announce it on the Monday anyway, but head on over to their app and you might be able to find some deals. Just thought I'd throw that out there if people have missed it. But, if you're sitting at home doing a lot of hobbying at the moment, maybe you want to grab a book to listen to while you're doing that. On the same front, Audible are doing a lot of sales at the moment, up to 50% off on a lot of books. Audible sales are dependent on region, so I'm not going to go through and look for stuff. If you're in the USA, you will get different offers than if you're in the UK or, wherever you are in the world. It will be slightly different, but it's a good opportunity to maybe pick up some stuff a little bit cheaper than you otherwise would. So go and have a look at that. And then in all this as well, we had the announcement for the next novella for the Siege of Terra. The Fury of Magnus. Magnus in the story, Magnus has always got his own plans. He's Zinch after all. So this novella kind of will follow on. It follows on from where Magnus is in book 4 and sits between book 4 and book 5 and takes Magnus to what he's up to in terms of what his plans are for the siege, and maybe they don't always line up with Horace's and whoever. Graham McNeil's written that. It was due to come out in September, I think, but or late summer for sure. Again, just keep an eye on that. They really good announcement time. They gave us 6 months kind of knowledge of this, which I think is fantastic. And they'll give us pre-knowledge of it as well. It's obviously you're going to have that kind of element of rushing for it again, but at the very least, they're letting us know what's going on with it, which is really cool. And then the final bit of kind of GW stuff. We talked a little bit earlier about vouchers and Games Workshop. Every business at the moment is looking to try and kind of keep some money coming in because these are uncertain times. And then it's just tricky. Yeah, let's not go into all that. It's just tricky. They want they don't want people spending money elsewhere that they would spend on those toys, and that's understandable. Companies want to make money. Games Workshop's kind of response to this, bearing in mind you can't buy stock from them at the moment, is to offer a deal if you buy vouchers. So if you spend £50 on Games Workshop vouchers, then they'll give you an extra £5, and that is for every part of £50. So if you want to be sure you can buy them in £5 allotments, that's fine. But I'm 99% sure that you, if you buy £100 worth of vouchers, you get an extra £10 worth of vouchers. Now, if you're buying regular plastic toys and you normally use an independent retailer, and particularly if you purchase in week of pre-release, that £5 is a 10% kind of bonus. If you're buying from Elements Games in the first week of pre-sale, you get 20% off. So it's obviously not as good value as that. So if you're into buying the latest 40k release, Age of Sigmar release, plastic Adeptus Titanicus release, maybe it's worth going and buying your Elements Games vouchers because you're still better off. You can buy Forge World vouchers. So Forge World's not available independent retailers. The Black Book will not be available in independent retailers. If you know you're going to go and get it, if you have the money to be able to pay for it, because we don't want people getting into trouble, if you feel confident you can put aside that money, we know that Black Book's going to be 80 quid, probably 80 or 85, depends how big it is really. Maybe you go and buy some vouchers. Why not get a little discount if you can afford it? So you can head over to GW and purchase them, or Forge World the websites. Something to think about. If you've got a project lined up and you want to purchase something big, then get 10% off of it effectively. It's go and make the most of it. Games Workshop are happy to see that money coming in now. It does help them, and you get a benefit from it. So yeah, it's quite nice of GW to do it. They don't have to. It might be helping them, but it's also helping us as well. Obviously, as I say, don't get yourselves into money troubles for it. If things are uncertain with jobs and everything else, then please make sure you're okay first, you and your family and whoever. But if you do have that money around you, you're going to spend it in that way, jump on it, make the most of it. That's what I say. I will probably put some in there myself because, as I say, I'm going to get the Black Book when it comes out, and maybe a few other toys as well. I managed to get some of the Demons of the Ruinstorm Brutes in before this all dropped down. Spent a fair bit of money on that, so I'm not looking at spending a huge amount of money on the hobby coming up. I've got plenty of projects to do, but yeah, I will be grabbing some vouchers for myself. In terms of other things going on, sticking with GW, Warhammer TV is now free to access during this period. This means you can go and watch. So it was always free to access live. It opens up the comments section, which, due to the numbers on there now, it almost becomes pointless to type on. Some might say that it was pointless to type on earlier because, as with any comments section, there's a mix of stuff going on there. There's a lot of just repeatedly asking questions that never going to get answered. There's some good stuff on there as well, but I'm not a massive fan. But then it's not my type of thing anyway. But what it does do is open up the whole back catalogue, so you can jump on there and go back and look at whatever it is, Hangout and Paints. There's they do the hangout and paints. They do chat to the people on there. There's some quite interesting stuff. You can go and look at previous games. You can look at kind of the talks about any different game system, and yeah, they do deal with a lot of what's coming up. But there are other little bits and pieces in there as well. They've started a book club up on the Friday. I don't know how good it is. I want to go and try it, but I fear it's going to be awful. Bless. Yeah, there's a lot of content on there that you can go and look up. So if you do find yourself wanting something to watch, maybe just throwing on Warhammer TV. So a lot of the stuff they do, you don't even really have to look at the screen. So again, it could be good for hobbying. Moving on slightly, Blood and Glory. So you may have noticed the tickets aren't out yet. We're holding off on that. Everything that's going on at the moment, it's all a bit up in the air. We will be getting information out there as and when, but I think it's a pretty sensible decision not to just charge on regardless and put tickets out. So we'll let you know. As I say, if you watch Facebook or Twitter, then it will go up there first anyway. In terms of events, private, kind of independent events, there are a couple of things that have happened. Obviously, with everything going on, so I was due to go to an event, and I won't say where and I won't say who, and they messaged to say the event's been cancelled due to the issues. Completely behind that, absolutely understandable, acceptable, fine. They then messaged to say that they were keeping the money because they'd already paid for the hall, and basically they paid out the money and they needed to recoup their costs. Now, in this instance, it wasn't really a problem. I didn't mind at all. I was a bit off-put by that message. If you're running an event and you don't provide that event, then I'm pretty sure that if someone wants their money back, they should be able to get their money back. And I'm pretty sure that they will be backed up by the law on that if you don't offer what people have paid for. And yes, we're independent events. Yes, we're doing it for the community and everything else, but that doesn't give us special powers. We just need to be a little bit sensible about what we're doing with events and what happens when they're cancelled and all that kind of stuff. If someone wants their money back, then I believe that you're going to struggle not to have to give them their money back. Again, on the other side of things, as an attendant and as an attendee, be a bit sensible with it as well. But for some people, that money, even if it's 20, 30 quid, could be really important to them, particularly in circumstances like we've got now when some people fall through the cracks on the support that's coming, and some people are fearful of having a job to go back to at the end of it and things like that. And maybe it's something we look at moving forwards as a podcast, talking about running events. I've got away with it over time. I thought about getting insurance for my events and doing it the right way because of the nature of me, the way I have run my events. It's been pretty much me knowing how everything works. And if I'm not there, how does it work? Does it fall down? Do you not have an event? Where do you sit in that? Now, there are ways around it. I've always felt confident that we could do something. But essentially, people have paid money for something, and if it doesn't happen, then they're probably rightfully due their money back if they want it. Company of Legends discovered that their insurance didn't cover the circumstances we've got now. So when you do go and look at insurance for events, and I think it all thoroughly depends on the size of the event. Some people might be able to dig their hands in their pockets and cover it out. If you've spent £200 on a venue and something else and it falls down, then maybe the people running the event can cover that. Cool, that's the risk you take. If you're doing a larger event, then maybe not. When it comes to doing an event in a gaming centre and stuff like that, obviously costs are reduced. It makes it easier if you're hiring a big venue. You need to make sure that none of us want to see independent event runners losing money. I don't think anyone is anyone who does is probably not worth listening to. So if it means increasing your prices a little bit, sometimes that's the way to do it. You've got to be aware of the issues that we potentially have. Now, this might sound like we're going over the top, but the last thing we want to see is anyone get in trouble for trying to help the community. So if you're running a decent size event, a big event, maybe it's worth looking at insurance. You don't have to go and get it. You can look into it without getting it. But if your event is cancelled, just think about what you're going to do if people want their money back. And there are lots of things around that as well. And as event goers, maybe like the cheapest option is to get that hotel that's non-refundable. If you're booking 9 months in advance, maybe we just need to pay that extra £10, £15 to maybe have it as refundable, just to save yourself some money, so that if it doesn't go ahead, you're not out of pocket. Those little things to think about, and they're all, none of them are hard and fast rules. They're all judgment calls based on what you think's going to happen and what have you. But it's a minor thing compared to everything that's going on in the world at the moment, but it could be something that really stresses someone out and causes problems and causes a loss of money. So, as I said, the company Legends guys ended up slightly out of pocket for, I hope they don't mind me mentioning, but that's the way it is. Insurance companies are insurance companies, and sometimes they're designed not to give you any money. And they've managed those costs. They know what they're doing with them. Graham, Chris, and Michael run quite a well-run ship in that respect. They know what they're doing. They bearing in mind they organise food and everything else. Luckily they can't. The timing of cancelling the event was before they went and bought a load of food for it as well. So that helps, but things to be aware of, I think, moving forwards around running events, particularly, say, the bigger the events. You look at something like Blood and Glory, even, which isn't huge compared to Adepticon and stuff like that. There's a lot of money that goes into that, and a lot of responsibility as well. So you need to be fairly sure of what you're doing. Coming in with that is PayPal announced some changes to the way they do payments. And if you're running an event now and you take payments by PayPal for that event, if you issue a refund, PayPal are going to keep the charges. So this is correct as far as a couple of weeks ago. I haven't double checked it, but I don't think they've changed it. But this is what they're proposing is, so if I pay to go to Blood and Glory and then I ask for a refund and it's all above board and Ben says, yep, have your refund, then the fees that he's been charged by PayPal don't get returned. So they have to come out of his pocket or the event's pocket. Now, when you're doing a 20-man event, maybe that's not a problem. Maybe it's the odd pound here or there and what have you. If you're doing a 600-player event, maybe 100 people dropping out costs you a lot of money. It's something that organisers, again, need to think about. If you're going to do PayPal payments, then maybe you need to put something into your pack to say, maybe you don't have to worry about it at all. That's the first thing. Maybe you're like, yeah, cool, I'm happy with that. That's not a problem. Maybe you need to put in your pack that there's a fee to cancel your tickets. Or maybe you need to look at some other system than PayPal. Again, it's a minor thing, but it's something that, so someone like Greetings for the Warp running a lot of events. Other people run, King Fluff over here runs a lot of events. So it might only be a small amount for a specific small event, but if you're running 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 events a year, then that all adds up. And I'm sure there's not a huge amount of people who want refunds for events, but again, it's just something to be aware of. So it might be worth going over to PayPal, looking at that, looking at how you accept payments for events. There's lots of different methods of doing it. In theory, PayPal have, I've seen this happen in the past. They've also held the money for an event until that event happens. So I've seen one of the big Warhammer events or Age of Sigmar events at the time that PayPal said, okay, yep, we've got all those payments, but we're not going to pay it out because they're all for an event that hasn't happened, which again causes cash flow issues. So PayPal, for all it's really good, might not always be the perfect answer. So we need to be kind of aware as a community, as tournament organisers, event organisers, about how these things work. So I thought it was worth mentioning. But I think that's probably, I've talked quite a long time by myself. Again, there's a lot of stuff obviously that you guys know about. I like to give kind of our review, our kind of take on what's going on, and hopefully there's a little bit of different information in there. But yeah, plenty of me talking. I think we'll take a break and we'll come back and we'll talk about Saturnine. And if you're on the fence about whether you want to read these kind of things, I'd stay and listen. I think this is a really good chat. Well, I'm glad to welcome back Mr. Michael to the show. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
How you doing? Yes,
very good, thanks. Thanks to be back.
Yes, it's cool. We're going to chat about Saturnine, and we had a pre-discussion about this, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah. So we like to keep these spoiler-free. The book's not out yet on general release, and many people haven't read it. A lot of people have or have heard the stories. The difference with Saturnine and a lot of the books we've read is there's a lot of action, isn't there?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of action and there's a lot of people and there's a lot of places involved. So, whereas if we look at the last book, The First Wall, we could talk about general kind of style and kind of a story that builds and what have you, and not give away too much. Saturnine just doesn't work like that. Saturnine is it's event after event with person after person and somehow collected together into this coherent story.
Yeah, I think we'll obviously try and be as spoiler free as possible and not give major things away, but there's only so far we can go with that.
Yes.
Short of making this a very brief conversation.
So if you're like me and you, I don't even read the dramatis personae at the front of the book, because I like that surprise that in Thor Ragnarok I didn't know, spoilers, I didn't know that Hulk was even in it because I didn't watch the trailers.
Yeah,
because I love that surprise that comes with that. So if you're like me like that, maybe don't listen. And then if you don't mind too much, cool, crack on.
Yeah, you can always hang fire and save this episode, and then sometime post June, come back and re-listen to it and see if you agree with us.
Yeah, I think that's the best way. But saying that, we're into Saturnine, Dan Abnett. So 4th book, taking us to the halfway point in the novels, at least.
Yeah.
Building off. Well, I think so. So John led off the series with this grand scope, with quite a lot of 3 main arcs for John, but a lot going on in those arcs.
Yeah.
Lost and the Damned kind of focused a little bit more on. It had multiple storylines, but there was a definite focus, and it seemed a bit tighter.
It was very much on one stretch of the wall.
Yeah,
as the Siege in Microcosm,
and then The First Wall again. It was about that one thing, but the 2 or 3 aspects of approach to it. Saturnine is it's 4 walls or 4 zones of engagement, should we say?
Yeah, that's right.
4 zones of engagement, but then the machinations around those which have to be dealt with, and we go quite a lot to visit Perturabo, and we get Magnus is there and Fulgrim's there, and all these other people are feeding into that. And then on top of that, we've got within these zones, in fact, outside of these zones of engagement, we've got John doing his thing. And then even within those zones of engagement, you've got other stories being told.
Yep.
And so we're dealing with 4 engagements, but 7 or 8 stories almost.
Absolutely. And by this point, the sort of subplots, I suppose you'd call them, people like John Grammaticus, are really starting to ramp up. It's not just that the grand action is ramping up, because it is. Again, a little bit of a spoiler if you haven't read The First Wall, but I think we assume that people will have done that. But now that the Lionsgate spaceport has fallen, the traitors are virtually in the palace. So, sure, that's ramping up. You've got the traitors assaulting the Lion's Gate itself and multiple bastions, walls of it. You've got the traitors assaulting the Eternity Gate as well, the other spaceport. So that's really ramping up, picking up speed, becoming bigger and bigger and more important. But also the subplots, I think, are as well. So there's people like John Grammaticus. There's some really interesting stuff digging into the history of the Imperium and the future of the Imperium that fans of the series and 40k will be able to pick quite a lot out of from a sort of foreshadowing perspective. And that's not just a little bit in the background going on. It's considerable page time for some of these characters. So, yeah, there's an awful lot going on in this. And I know you said you didn't read the Dramatis Personae beforehand. I flicked through it. There are 8 pages of it.
Yeah.
There are a lot of characters in this book.
Yeah, absolutely. And big characters, important key characters whose stories are defined or help define not just the battle for Terra, but also pushing through into 40k as well. It's almost crazy how much goes on in this book. I think because you talked to me before you wrote your article, kind of just to kind of make sure it worked, and if you broke this book down to try and talk to someone, it's very easy to make it sound rubbish. I think because there's so much going on, it would feel like. So for me, the third Star Wars prequel is just a collection of scenes that are pushed together to try and fit in too much of a story for one film. All right, so that's how I view it. But that happens quite a lot in films. You see, they made a 2-hour film where it should be a 2.5, 2 3/4 hour film, but actually wouldn't be any good. But you know what I mean? Is then they if we cut all the middle bits out and just put scenes together, it will work.
Yeah.
And somehow Dan's managed to write this book that doesn't do that.
Yeah, and I think I don't mean to be disparaging to any other authors, Black Library authors and general authors, but Dan just has this knack of being able to do a bunch of things. He's able to really blend the macro and the micro in a way that other people do very well too. So he's able to show this grand sweep of the events along with very personal moments which help show the whole thing. But he's also able to replicate that out and extend it out in a way that I've never really seen anyone else do. So we talked, when I was writing my review, about Necropolis, one of Dan's Gaunt's Ghost books.
Yeah.
And that, I've read other stories, sort of siege stories, where people have tried to do the same thing, where you have loads of different characters and you rotate through them and they each show a different angle on what's going on. And I've never come across anyone who can do that the way Dan does. And we talked quite a bit about Necropolis and how Saturnine essentially takes that recipe and makes it bigger and bolder and more complex and more impactful. And he manages to do that in this enormous scale, because this isn't a hive. This is the Imperial Palace. This is vast. And we're talking Abaddon and Sanguinius and Loken and all these major characters. But he manages to do all of that, combine all of that with the right pacing, always knowing how long to spend with each character so you get enough, but you're not then forgetting what's going on elsewhere.
Yeah.
But also, I think the thing that really sets it apart for me is this his ability to take that step back to pause and show a tiny little moment that just brings that scene to life, or brings a character to life, or even just something throughout, just a little reference that humanizes it and really hooks you in and gives you that detail. So I don't want to sort of spoil too much, but there's the way that there's quite a lot of sections with Imperial Army soldiers, and the way they see themselves, the way their sense of identity has been rolled up, because they come from regiments all across Terra, and how they sort of retain their own identity whilst being subsumed into the Defenders. It's just magnificent, and it's just tiny little things like that.
Yeah.
That really sets this apart, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And it's hard because it makes it sound like you're blowing smoke up Dan, but and it's hard, to be honest with this book. It's hard not to. Dan has every author has skill sets, has things they're good at, things they're less good at. And some authors will have less things they're less good at, if you know what I mean, and everything else. Dan's, as you say, Dan's ability to have multiple storylines that are working towards telling a grand story, as you say, without losing sight of what's happening, without being confused by what's happening, and without not caring or what have you, to make all those points work and flow. We've seen a handful of times. Necropolis is the prime example of that before this. And the other thing Dan has always done well is write human perspective of transhuman war.
Yeah.
So, and this book brings those two things together. So we talked about Necropolis. Essentially partly because someone turned around to me and, partly because of the amount of storylines involved, partly because I heard someone on another podcast say this can't be better than Necropolis. And okay, you're going to judge an individual book against an individual book. Everyone's going to have their opinion on it. Mm-hmm. One of the most amazing things Dan has done is he's taken Necropolis and he's multiplied it by about 5, because he's had to, because those are the stories he's got to tell. But also, Necropolis was an original content book. So he could write that, in theory, he could write that and just hand it in. And because of the world he was working in, because of the area of space, he could pretty much do what he wanted. Mm. With Saturnine, he has explicit points of reference to hit. The whole reason some of the characters are in here is because they need to be set up for what's going on further down the line.
That's right.
So not only is there more, it's also bigger. It's also containing people of a magnitude of power greater than Gaunt's Ghosts does. And then you've also got to make sure that you hit those points and don't miss any. And some of those points are contradictory because of the nature of the way the Horus Heresy is written. Dan sort of speaks about this in his afterword as well. And some of them are not... some of them are not maybe they're not... what's the word? They're not specific. They're not factual in terms of being able to pinpoint something to a specific instance. They could be written from points of view and all those kind of things that come with it. So I think when you put all that together, that only makes the book better because he's managed to do it. And it would have been so easy to get one thing wrong and for the book to fall down. And so for me, I'll say it right now. I think this is possibly the best book I've ever read in the Black Library.
High praise.
Yeah. And weirdly, it's annoying because you can't just turn around to someone and go pick up that book and read it because they wouldn't necessarily get that.
No, that's right.
So, but if you know the background, if you've read the books that come before it, I'm trying to think of a book that's better and I'm struggling.
Well, I mean, I think that's all. Those are all entirely fair points. For me personally, I'm not going to go out and say I think this is subjectively better than Necropolis. It's a different sort of thing. Yeah. I get where you're going, And I think it is bigger, and it's grander, and it's more complex. Necropolis, for me, still has an emotional attachment because I've read it so many times and I care about those characters so much. But this is phenomenal. And you talked about all the different characters that it has to draw in and then set up. And in fact, some of them it doesn't set up. Some of them it draws in and concludes.
Yep.
But plenty of them it does set up. And these are from... I was sort of going through as I was reading it going, hang on a minute, that's a character from Master of Mankind. Or that's a character from this weird little short story called Misbegotten that loads of people won't have read because it was in an event-only anthology, but is awesome. You know, there are so many things he draws from. And I think this is something that all of the Siege authors have done really well, is managing to bring stuff in that doesn't make this feel like an action that's happening away from everything else that's happened in the past. You know, there's been new characters, as is right, but there's been plenty of the right characters, the right existing characters coming in. But it's only going to get more complicated. And I just think Dan's handled that magnificently.
So you say it's only going to get more complicated. I think there are certain challenges that will only increase as we go into the last 4 books. I was just sitting there listening to you talk, and I wonder if, because I'm going to presume that Dan's going to write the last book, because all the pressure on him is for Dan to write the last book. You know, even other Black Library authors would prefer Dan to write the last book, which always made me think, well, he'll write one of the first 2 or 3 then, to be able to allow time. I wonder if there was a layout, because I wonder if there was when they were in their meetings, they knew that they were going to get to this point, and this point was going to be a Nexus book, and shoot, we'll give it to the guy who can write the Nexus book. And maybe the next book is a slightly more simplified story. We're trying to work out kind of what stories to be told after this. And yeah, there's a few. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there's nothing to be written. But maybe those other stories don't have quite so many moving parts in them, because this does do so much, this book.
It certainly does. I mean, that's absolutely a possibility. As the events narrow down, the complexity drops. I think it could go either way. And I would be slightly surprised if the next book isn't at least as complex. But then, who knows? Because I guess it's down... A huge amount of this, I think, we're praising Dan massively. We should also be praising the group of authors and the editorial team for steering this, and obviously the editors will have had a huge impact on this book, so fantastic work to Nick and co there. But I think a big part of what happens next, and whether, as you say, it does start to streamline, is the editorial choices that they as a group will have made of, is this the point, as you say, that's a Nexus, and they start going, we could tell all these other things, but now we're just going to stop those and maybe tell them in side stories or whatever. Or is that going to be, books 7 or 8 that they start? And we don't know, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next one. It will inevitably have to happen at some point, because the final confrontations, I doubt we'll get a book which is just the Emperor and co transporting onto Vengeful Spirit. Other things will be happening.
Yes.
But it will have to, there'll be less to talk about by the end.
The focus
I wouldn't be surprised if there's still quite a lot that we don't know about to come. So, for example, no spoilers whatsoever, but there is a thing which happens in this one, which is a major thing, arguably the major thing, which has, as far as I'm aware, is a totally new concept, but makes so much sense and is absolutely awesome. And I have a feeling there's going to be a few more of those still to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're quite right. When we get to the last book, the focus needs to be narrowed down to maybe, a handful of major incidents, because otherwise you're not going to have they're not going to carry that weight if they haven't got the space to tell those stories and to build into that. I'm just trying to think about like events that happen on Terra where there are a lot to happen. We know Magnus has got his limited edition novella coming out, and there's a glimpse in here of of Magnus. I will say that, and it leads into that, and maybe that novella's the end of his story. Maybe goes on beyond that. We don't know. As you say, there's certainly another major player in this book whose story appears to be written. So when you look at that aspect of it, you can tick off some of those things we do know about the siege. You can say, well, that one's done within reason. Obviously, there can be changes to that, but you suspect that one's done. Is Magnus's novella going to be his story? Because he's a really interesting character around the siege, and certainly his motives at this point are maybe not as quite in line with the traitors as they think. But then we've known that for a while, haven't we? With Magnus, he's a little bit off on his own.
I suspect he will make brief appearances at least once more before the end. But I have a feeling that novella might see the bulk of the Thousand Sons involvement wrapped up.
And in theory, as the siege pushes on, like the area they're containing gets smaller. We know about the old lore. You know about things like Carbanda. You know about the White Scars riding out. You know the various places where Sanguinius has to be. Those kind of things, but they're going to throw things at us. That is undoubtedly, without doubt. There's 4 more books to go. There's a lot to go. But,
there is, and I think
who knows.
I imagine, given that there are a finite number of big moments that we know about, there's. I don't know. I think you need lots of contrast, don't you? So I think, again, like I said before, one of the reasons this works so well is because there's that balance. There's the massive fist bumping, awesome, yes, that was amazing moments, combined with a lot of calmer, no less interesting, but less like overtly exciting moments. And I think when you've got the Khan riding out and Kabanda and all these sort of things, they've got to maintain those dynamics.
Yeah.
And so it could be that for every grand awesome thing we know about, there's actually going to be more of the Legionnaires on the ground. I think that Saturnine, we perhaps saw, well, not even perhaps, as the series has gone on, there's been more of the Fists and the Blood Angels.
Yeah.
To the point that there's a reasonable amount of them in Saturnine. There is the possibility that future books will almost pull back a little bit from the Primarchs, so they're observed rather than seen from their eyes, and we'll get more of those, not necessarily Lion Legionaries, but lower-ranking folks, sort of broadening the story out. But who knows?
Yeah,
I guess we've talked for quite a long time about this possibility, the possibilities. Yeah. I think people listening to this will gather from us rambling that we're just excited because this book, it isn't just awesome. It doesn't just leave you going, that was amazing. It left me going, damn, like I really, really want to read the next book now.
So it started off and I was like, this is a good book. This is a good book. And then I think it's like page 80-ish. There's an incident, which you kind of alluded to earlier, I believe, where you're like, wow. And as you said, Sanguinius, where he says, this is a footnote, and you're like, oh, that was amazing. In fact, I saw someone write on the Facebook page, the unofficial Black Library Facebook page, like, I've got to page 80 and this bit was amazing. And I was like, oh, bless you. Because you do not know where you're going yet. And if you told me at that point that probably wouldn't be in my top 5 single scenes in that book, like, I'd think you're an idiot. But actually, yeah.
By the time you get to the end, yeah.
But there are just so many scenes, and it's not necessarily the things you think they're going to be either. It's not the scenes that you would think. We all know that we're going to see Primarchs fighting, right? And a lot of people want to see that, and that's the highlight for them, is to see those things. And you're not going to be disappointed in the fights that Primarchs are involved in this fight.
At all.
Not at all. You might be surprised with how good some of the other fights are. If you're just looking at action, the And it's not just how cool the action is either; it's how clever the action is, both in terms of what's happening, but also how it's described.
That's right. Dan talks about that in his afterword, and I did an interview with him where he mentioned a similar thing. And this book is, 550-something pages long. There is a lot of fighting in it.
Yes.
Inevitably. But at no point did I get that action fatigue at any point.
No.
And that's because of, as you say, how clever Dan's been with writing it. And it's choosing the right viewpoints, the right characters through whose eyes he shows the fighting, the action, and the right style, making the right stylistic choices. So, for example, we get to see action, battles through mortal Imperial army viewpoints, a range of different Astartes. Janisha Kroll, is that how you say her name?
Yep.
The chief of the Sisters of Silence, Primarchs, like all sorts of different characters, and each. I mean, I almost feel like that this is if you're interested in writing, go back and read this multiple times and see how many times different ways Dan's able to tell the story of a fight. There are moments which are in the thick of the action, describing everything. There are moments which are pulled back, God's eye view. There's probably my favourite of the fight scenes is it's entirely in someone's head, and he's not even really describing the fighting. It's describing what's going through this character's mind as he's progressing through the mental, psychological stages of the combat and what it's doing to him. It's super clever. And I don't think I've read anyone do that.
No.
That sort of in-your-head psychological element of it in that way before. Plenty of the others we've seen, but just shown it from the perspective of someone who is a Sister of Silence and the unique viewpoint she has on what's going on and how her actions are perceived by others, contrasted with the other people watching her fight or watching the after effects of her fight. Those happen in two different times, and it's still the same big picture conflict.
Yeah.
But it's shown from such different perspectives that you almost forget you're watching the same thing because it's just super interesting.
And Dan's, he's been writing this kind of stuff for long enough, and I'm sure his comic book writing plays into it as well. And that scene that you were talking about with the internal thing is knowing when not to show the fighting is key to all of that, because you could so easily just get lost in it. But the amount of times where you're like, oh, we didn't see that fight, but we didn't have to. That's fine, cool. But you don't know you don't have to till you passed it and whatever. In terms of that, as I say, the cleverness of all the people involved, the style. One of the overarching kind of things is this siege is Dawn versus Perturabo. We've known that for a long time, and to see them both in their pomp, like we've waited a long time for Dawn, to be shown that way. Even in Praetorian of Dawn, there were elements of that where he was full on, but it wasn't the whole book. Like in this, he is, even if he loses, whether he wins or loses, he is in full pomp, giving it everything. And then on the other side of it, the cold kind of calculation of Perturabo, in full mode, and the scope of what he's doing is that much larger because he's got that much more, but maybe less. Things could go wrong for him a little bit more. I mean, in terms of he's got more resources to work with, so that he can make the odd mistake or whatever. But he's not, because it's Perturabo. So you've got this overarching over all of that as well, which only feeds into that action, whilst not really dealing with it. It's quite amazing.
It is. And we've talked a lot about action.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot about it. But one of the other strands I sort of alluded to before was this idea of history and the future. And so, yes, we've talked a lot about the fighting. If you prefer the quieter moments, you're not going to be bombarded with too much of the action here. There's still plenty to enjoy. I don't really want to go into too many details because risks properly spoiling it.
Yeah.
But characters like Cinderman, who had to be still taking a big part, I think, from how he's interacted with other parts of the series. he's got a crucial part to play here, and a few other characters who are really digging beneath the surface. And if you've read books like Valdor recently, some of the other 40k and Heresy books, which have just sort of dug beneath the surface a little bit, I think Dan's got just the right level of that in as well, to leave you asking questions, to leave you wondering if, oh my God, has he actually explained something here? Is this something that we're going to take away and read as canon?
Yeah.
Or should I consider this person perhaps an unreliable narrator even more than normal? There's plenty of that as well. So I think this is going to be a thought-provoking book for a lot of people, and is going to provoke a lot of conversation and discussion and debate online, which, just to briefly segue, is another frustration that people can't all read it at the same time.
Absolutely.
I think it's starting to become fundamentally disappointing that this is the end of the series that a lot of people have been reading for a really long time. And you and I are lucky enough that we can afford to pick up the really ridiculously expensive limited editions.
And lucky enough to buy them.
And lucky enough to get them. Be there in the queue. But huge numbers of people would love to be reading this at the same time. And you and I were chatting about it as we were reading. But we've missed that apart from the two of us. Who else? I know a handful of people who have bought it, a smaller handful who have read it. I'd love to be able to take this conversation and either interact or just see other people's viewpoints on it. That I think is a proper mistake, actually. That for the Siege, as it's getting so important, as it's getting so good, that there isn't that buzz. The standard edition is due in June. If that happens, given the craziness of the world around us, I mean, this should be the biggest moment so far in the Horus Heresy, and it kind of isn't.
No,
in the community. And
even if you and 6 other of our friends got it, that's not the same as posting online where thousands of people are reading it, and you notice that one little bit, that person who says, "Oh, did you notice in this that relates?" Because if you've got a finite group, you're not going to get that. And so you're missing out on all those extra little bits, those bits that make you really think, because as well, it can be that if you've got a group of friends, you'll tend to think the same way. You can get a bit of that. And sometimes it's that bombshell from someone who thinks completely different to you. It might not be exactly what they say, but they can make you think in a different path. And you do miss that, because as you said, there are aspects of this story, I am sure when this book drops, there are people who are going to go, right, well, that's solved. And I'm like, yeah. But there are going to be people who do that because that's how they read books, and that's fine, that's cool, whatever. Or because it's what they want to believe is the truth. There's a whole section of this book that deals with that. And then another part of the section that almost kind of tells you not to believe everything you read. There's a whole bit on mythology. And that's where this book does so well. When we talk about it setting up stuff, yes, it sets up certain Primarchs to be where they need to be. It fits in certain, one-liners from the old lore that have to be met, even though the geography of the situation makes it impossible for those to be met. And it deals with, Space Marines. As I say, some stories are ended, some are concluded, and some are left to carry on. But there are stories that are yet to come that are definitely contradictory. So, right off the top of my head, right, the easiest one is there are 3 people who are supposed to be on the Ventral Spirit that are destroyed to make the Emperor see the light that Horus can't turn back. And we don't know which one of those 3 it's going to be, or even if it's going to happen that way. Mm-hmm. So right there, that's one instance where there's 4 options to do. At least, 3 options and 1 completely different option, that whatever they go with. Not everything in the Siege can be exactly how it's written because of the way it was written. And this book starts to just really, it's always been there, but this is kind of, there's a little bit of a stake in the ground, I think, with this one.
I agree. And it's interesting you mentioned that, like, the characters being in certain places where they perhaps shouldn't be able to be. You're absolutely right. Despite having been a big fan of this for a long time, I'm less clued up with the really old lore of the heresy.
Yeah.
I haven't, for example, for years gone back and reread the old William King story and the stuff from Visions. So for me, in fact, it was reading Dan's afterward that I went, oh, I hadn't really picked up on this element being to sort of explain such a thing. And I think, again, that's just another piece of evidence that shows that if you're looking for it, like you are, it works. It makes sense. If you don't know to look for it, you don't know it's there. It didn't feel to me at any point that I went, oh, I don't really know what Dan's saying here, but it feels like he's hammering a point home.
Sure, yeah.
It never felt he was labouring the point. And I think that potentially could have been a risk of, oh, we have to make sure fans get this, so let's make that really clear. None of that.
No, it's done in a very clever way that is just designed to just remind you that that stories are malleable.
Indeed, and history is very malleable.
Extremely malleable, and for a variety of reasons as well. And that, I think that's the beauty of it, is there's more than one example of why or how a story might be told the way a person thinks it happened. And that helps. That helps with those contradictions for starters, but it also helps with 40k lore that reviews the heresy lore, because again, that's a whole different issue where there are contradictions and there are leaps of logic to get from X to Y. So within this book that is manic in its scope of action, which is kind of so detailed in a number of characters, like really is, we really get into like Abaddon at certain points. We really get into Dawn actually more than we've ever had, and I'm picking those two and no more because I don't want to pick any more. And we really do get into that. But even within that space of that book, and it's a big book, but come on, most of us who read have read bigger books than this. It's not like, if you're in fantasy and sci-fi, you've probably read some epics in your time. So it's not huge like some of those books, but it's a big book. But it never felt like a big book.
No,
and that's a talent, and that is one of the biggest things I think to give this book credit for. And in fact, as I got through the book, it had that ineffable quality of I started to read it more.
Yeah.
And I thought at the start I was enjoying it, and then it was like, hold on, what's next? And it's not just page turning, but it was like a real depth of wanting to read more.
Absolutely. I read quickly, so I only get sort of part of that. But for me, the equivalent is, I know a book is really working for me when a big moment happens and I sort of put it down and go, you bastard. Dan, you absolute bastard. What have you just done? And that's not necessarily because someone died. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's just because you go, I didn't see that come in. That was amazing. But multiple times in this. And I think the siege up to this point, the Solar War for me had quite a lot of surprises. It was grand. It was massive. It was like, oh, this is exciting. And then I feel a little bit for Guy and Gav because the parts of the story they had to tell were just not as exciting. So they were a bit deeper and more like character focused on the real nitty gritty of how awful this is for a human being, which worked. It came across brilliantly, I thought, but had fewer of the fist bump moments, had fewer of those what sort of moments. And I don't think that's a reflection on them. I think that's a reflection on what they were asked to write. But I think whoever wrote this book, Dan has done an amazing job of it, but the things which happen, whoever would have written those, you would have got very similar reactions, maybe not the same, but similar. And I have a feeling that each book that comes afterwards is going to contain lots of those because there's no time for, I'm going to dwell on the grim realities of a human being dealing with being in the trenches. Now, there's too much to cover, too much is exploding. We're not going to get those. But we've had that. Now it's pacey, it's something's happening, and it's going to be relentless now, I think, till the end.
I think you might be right. I think there's possibly an aspect of timings in that a lot has to happen in a very short window with the siege, and so most of the things that happen in Saturnine, some of those stories potentially could have been earlier. There are a couple that don't fully interact in the same way as the others, although actually they probably do, thinking about it. No, yeah, I think they do. I think every story has to be told in that timescale. And so actually from the space battles to this, there isn't a huge amount of specific stories to be told. There's general sieging.
Yeah, and so, which you need to cover to give it the depth and the weight. You can't skip over that.
No, but that means that, you like, I feel Gav had maybe had to write a book, and actually it would have been useful if a couple more things happened in that time scale, in a way. Not to say the book's bad, but I just feel that it felt, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it was almost like those two books tell different stories as well, as you're right. They're telling a story of the siege. They're setting the scene for what comes. They're showing the grand scope of it. But I felt, particularly with First Wall, it was just missing an extra element in there somewhere.
That's fair enough. I think the Zenobi's arc didn't quite speak to you the way it did me.
No.
I loved that. And I was chatting to someone online recently who reacted in much the same way I did. But that's fine, and that's personal preference and response. But I think I can see how, if that didn't chime for you, the book might not have felt like as thrilling as you wanted it to be.
But whatever way, it had, the story it was telling was in terms of complexity, was minute compared to what this is telling in terms of number of threads. Like, it's a simpler story, and that's not to downgrade it in the way that Gav wrote a big fight, because it still has its complexities, but it didn't have to deal with quite so many interlocking parts in that respect. We know there is still a fair bit to happen. I remember talking to Chris at Black Library Weekender, and he was like, yeah, Dan's writing his at the moment, and he said it's like one of the hardest books he's ever had to write. And Chris was like, I'm a bit worried. And I wonder if it started to work on his, because again, like, it's going to be, and I wonder if that's why Gav has been on record for saying he's not the best at keeping specific details in his head.
Oh, okay.
In terms of, some people could, write off, oh yeah, no, that happened in this year, and he used that gun and whatever. And Gav's much more like, well, I've got this cool story, and then get kind of the details get put in as and when. Almost, that's doing a disservice. It's not quite that simple. But so I wonder if there's an element of that, because as we say, Dan can write this kind of book. Yeah, I don't know, but I feel that Chris there's the pressure of it being a siege book. So Dan said this was one of the hardest books he's ever to write. John said he had a real hard time writing his. Again, those two particularly so far have had to do the most kind of interlocking work for multiple storylines. Moving forwards, Chris and ADB, probably Dan again. And do we think Guy's going to write the other one?
Yeah, that's the natural John or Guy, surely, because John, who's had the longest span between books, and Guy because he's such a rapid writer.
Absolutely, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of work to go on.
Huge amount.
It's going to be really interesting, really interesting. But I stand by what I said. I think this is, and this is one of those best of that's. I'm taking into technical ability into account of what Dan had to do as much as the story. I think I find it hard pressed to find a better book in the Black Library series.
Well, that's very high praise, and I mean, it's hard to argue with that. It is phenomenal. Like, how many times when we've talked about books have we talked about something with zero criticism? We're always, I think, constructive, and we talk about not just something that maybe we don't think is as good, but talk about why and what might have caused it. And with the exception of, I could see that some people who want fans who are really interested in the detail and the facts might find some of the things, quote unquote, revealed here either too much or not enough.
Yeah,
but I mean that's like the nitpickiest of nitpicky things,
or not what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but that, which really is a criticism they could levy over every single Horus Heresy book,
absolutely, yeah.
Arguably every 40k book, Black Library one. So I can't think of a time where we haven't gone, or one of us hasn't said, no, but I didn't like that quite as much about something.
How many Black Library books have you given 5 stars on your reviews?
I don't know, relatively few.
Yeah, and so there we go. Right, immediately. It's in a very small section of Black Library novels. I can't remember who I was talking to, but basically I said, I'm going to get it on Audible when it comes out.
Okay.
And I'm going to, because I almost started reading it again.
Like when I was writing my review, I went back and reread Dan's afterward, and then I just went, I'm just going to read that bit at the end when in the thing with the guy. And I read the whole scene. Oh, God, this is amazing. I could probably read the whole thing again if I had time right now.
Yeah, I think I would if I wasn't, doing other things. And, I don't want to read my limited edition too many times. I might get the ebook when it comes out as well. So I might buy this book 3 times.
Well, I'm going to certainly buy it too, because I've been buying the standard hardback.
Sure, yeah.
As well, because they look great on the shelf.
But it's that good. And
it is.
I have... So... it's a limited window, I will say that, but I have some friends who are fairly critical of GW, and people I follow on Instagram or Twitter or whatever. I have yet to see anyone who says it isn't amazing, if not one of the best books they've read in the Black Library.
Before I came on, I went and had a look on Goodreads. It only has 13 ratings, a small handful of reviews. Of those 13 ratings, 12 of them are 5 stars. And one of those is from someone who is very critical about pretty much everything Black Library puts out. I leave you to work out who that is.
I'm pretty sure I can guess the accent. It's fine.
If you know, you know.
Yeah.
And 5 stars from that person.
That is extremely high. It's bearing in mind that person doesn't always deal with lore reveals very well either.
Mm.
That's quite impressive, yeah. So I think just on that fact, you can't always judge something by the way people react to it, but sometimes you really can.
Yeah,
and I think this is that.
I agree. Certainly, everyone I've seen on social media, people who've interacted with me when I've talked about having read it or put my review up, or people I've just seen on Twitter and Facebook elsewhere. Yeah, I haven't seen anything that isn't gushing with praise. And I think when you see that collective sense of excitement about something, it does become infectious. And I've seen other people say, there's a friend of mine on Twitter, who I think I said something along the lines of, I need some time to work out what to say about this. And he responded saying, very little fills me with excitement as much as you saying you need time. Because I guess I say that when it's something that's really blown my mind and I'm trying to work out how to talk about it. But there definitely is a degree of buzz around this. Refer back to my previous point of, I think the buzz would be vastly, exponentially bigger if lots of people were reading at the same time. And I hope that buzz returns in June.
Well, it just frustrates me, and Black Library might not be able to do it for various reasons, but at a time when a lot of people are stuck in their houses with, not everyone's got time, but plenty of people do have a bit of extra time at the moment and, a need to do something with it. An ebook release of this now would I mean, it was, I've got it and I'll buy it again. But a lot of people would be on this. And then we could have those conversations.
Yeah.
It would be amazing. I don't think it's going to happen.
You've said it online. I've said it online. I've seen loads of people asking for it. I agree. And I'm sure there are, I'm not being facetious here, I'm sure there are genuine financial reasons. Sales will have been forecasted for that particular time, and it may not be suitable to adjust that depending on the business's plans. That's fine, but you do feel like you've seen a lot of businesses changing things up. And to be fair, BL have been doing books of the week on their audio app for 99p, which is brilliant, and kudos to them for that sort of thing. But I agree with you. It would have been a really lovely gesture to say, we're excited about this. Everyone who's read it so far is really excited about this. Knock yourself out. We're going to make it available.
I wonder if it's agreements with bookshops.
But I doubt it, given BL's general sense of preferring to push sales through their own channels, and the limited edition having already been out. But you might be right. I don't know the minutiae of that. It
depends what deals they've got, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. This is a speculation. But yeah, I think if they don't do it, they're missing a trick. And
totally agree.
And we've had this discussion before. Bearing in mind the nature of collecting this series, releasing the ebook alongside releasing all formats of this book at the same time would not diminish the limited edition sales.
No, look at Rachel Harrison's Mark of Faith, which, to be fair, is a phenomenal book. The special edition came out at the same time as the standard editions and flew out, sold out immediately. And sure, there were fewer copies, but it was a much newer author who, while I would argue is comfortably up there with any other Black Library writer, she doesn't have the cachet that Abdel does.
Absolutely.
And it's still sold out, flew out the door.
And although you say it's a brilliant book, the people who bought it probably didn't know that when they bought it.
No, not at all.
So, yeah, people who collect limited editions, we've said it before, will collect limited editions. There's Black Library sales groups that are pretty much about collecting limited edition books. Particularly with the Siege, 2,500 books are going to sell. It's as simple as that. I still believe that they're not far off the amount of numbers they'd sell anyway. Like, I know getting into the whole eBay thing, whatever. But everyone who's collecting this series will want to collect this series, period. So I don't think you lose anything. I feel like we're banging our heads against the wall with that, but I will keep saying it because I feel it needs to be said. And also, as soon as you give up, it's never going to happen. Some people seem to think that I'm, I've been called a fanboy and whatever. I'll bang this drum for as long as possible. Give more people ways of buying books straight away, and we can get that chat back. We can get that excitement back.
Yeah.
Which means people go back to forums. They get on. It's things like if you talk about that book on Twitch, and I haven't read it, I'll turn off the Twitch chat. I mean, I'll probably turn off the Twitch chat anyway because it's Twitch chat. But Games Workshops is better than some. But if people are gonna, if I know a book's just come out and people have read it, it will, people just blurt it out anyway. Mm-hmm. So, give everyone that opportunity to get involved and have the proper conversations and actually draw people into Facebook groups and forums and Discord chats about that book.
Yeah. And it can only have a positive effect because people who will dip their head into that conversation to see what's going on, who haven't read The Heresy, will see the excitement and go, oh, I need to get in on this.
And at the very least, it removes that little bit of negativity that people harbour then towards GW because it's there. There's a lot of resentment, and it's most people it's a well balanced resentment. Like it's not overtaking them or anything, but they're a little bit like, well, why would I? Because GW don't let me read this book for 6 months. Fair play. Yeah, I don't blame you.
I think the only silver lining is that it is the gap between limited and standard releases for the Heresy stuff is 3 months.
Yeah.
Unlike the quote-unquote mega editions, which is 6 months. And going off on a bit of a tangent, but when we were at the Weekender and I saw Guy Haley's Darkness in the Blood, I loved Dante. I loved Devastation of Baal. In theory, I'm hyped to read Darkness in the Blood, but my peak hype has gone.
Yeah.
Am I going to buy even the standard hardback 6 months later, so in June or whenever it's due to come out? We haven't been told. Or am I going to go, well, I kind of got the others in paperback. Maybe I'll just wait for that, because I've already waited 6 months.
Yeah, and you're excited about the other 130 things they've announced in the between times. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And also, as well, there's that, when we talk about that limited edition second-hand market, if it's available in ebook, then the 50 or 60 people that are buying it to read it and then sell it on immediately because they have to know the story but don't want to spend the money on the book aren't having to buy that book. So that's 50 or 60 people who want to own the book are getting it. So there's that element of it as well. There's a lot in there and I just think for all the good PR that GW have done over the last however many years, for Black Library fans, this would be a huge boost to them to be able to say, you know what, guys, just have it all at the same time.
Yeah.
Crack on, enjoy the books, talk about the books. Because you do wonder, again, with that loss of, say Rachel's book didn't sell that well in the limited edition. If it had been just a limited edition come out and people were like, oh, I don't want to spend it that much. Okay, cool. And then a small group are talking about how good Rachel is. And then by the time the book comes out, it's overshadowed because Aaron's released a book 2 weeks before.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Then does Rachel get lost in that? And her career is, I'm sure she could go and write other stuff, but has taken a setback because, well, you don't sell that well compared to everyone else. So there is a little bit more riding on it than just what we want to read as well.
Yeah. Now, I would imagine, at risk of suggesting or implying more organisation than maybe there is, I would imagine conversations like this have happened internally and decisions have been made based on sales figures. They like the sales of limited editions and feel like those are additional sales. Fine, it is what it is, but it's from our perspective, it would be nice to see that change. And even if it doesn't change, just a little bit more clear communication about what to expect. Like they started to get a bit better at that, of telling us, like the Magnus, great. They told us when it was going to be available in limited edition, plenty of time in advance, when the standard edition would be available. But I think that's the first time in years I've been able to say that. So let's keep that up. And then if possible, let's push for just parity. Just put things out at the same time. Just do it once. See what happens.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. I guarantee you, it won't be their worst fears. Like, even if it's not the success that they hope, it won't be a failure. But and to be honest, it's one of those things I don't think I'll ever shut up about, because I just think it's a good thing. I think it's a fairer thing, and I think they would gain a lot from doing it personally. Whether it's that initial sales on that first time they do it, I think the kind of the goodwill that you'll earn from your readers in the long term would be extremely beneficial. I
agree. And in this, reeling it back into Saturnine, in this situation, in the circumstances under which we all exist at the moment, I guess most people, if not everyone who's listening to this, is on some form of lockdown or isolation. The opportunity, it's still going to cost, you still have to pay $9.99 for the ebook, but the opportunity to buy something at this time that everyone who's read it is hyped about, it just feels like a no-brainer, doesn't it?
Almost the definition of a captive audience.
Yeah.
But yeah, all good. Right, I think we'll probably leave it there. We managed to talk like an hour, mostly on Saturnine, without actually giving too much away. Which,
I think so.
We can talk. But yeah.
Well, certainly, I am looking forward to the general release, and hopefully people will engage in this conversation again. And I'd certainly like to hear what other people think. And as you pointed out, I'm looking forward to those moments where someone just drops a throwaway comment, and I think, God damn, I spent so long thinking about this, and I still haven't spotted that.
Yeah.
So hoping for some of those.
There's so much lore out there now that you can't know everything.
No way.
So, and even these guys, it's quite funny. I was listening to someone who was like, I've been in this hobby for 20 years. And I'm like, well, bless you, mate. I mean, I've been in this hobby for 30 years and I still don't consider myself to be as much of a veteran as a lot of people I know. And even then it's like, well, I'm a veteran of this many years, but I've focused on these games.
Exactly.
So much. Groovy. Awesome. Well, we'll get you on again at some point soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't know what's next. We may have to slightly adjust how we talk about the Primark stuff because I still haven't read one of them. And it's on the shelf. I'll read it eventually. And there's obviously the new one. I haven't bought the limited edition of The Lion, but the standard edition will be out soon. And there's the novellas.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's other bits and pieces. So maybe we'll adjust the plans or whatnot. But yeah, I look forward to coming back and chatting about something heresy.
Awesome.
In the future.
We'll sort something out. Take it easy, man.
You too. Thanks, mate.
Well, you've made it to the end of another show. You may hear Magnus purring away on my lap. He's decided to join me for the closeout of the show. There's a few things to go through. Obviously, if you have any feedback, greg@theimperialtruth.com. If you want to support the show, we have a Patreon. You can find the link in the show notes. We have Element Games. You can use the links to purchase what toys they've still got left, or as we said earlier, vouchers. And then when this all finishes, we can get back to buying more toys. And Geek Shield, if you are looking for some insurance for yourself, then head over and chat to them. If you said feedback, greg@theimperialtruth.com. You can follow the Twitter, imperial_truth on Twitter. You can join the Facebook group. You can find me at Child of Fang on Twitter and Instagram as well. There's not a lot to specifically go into because there's not a lot happening. There are a lot of people doing a lot of hobby on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and various other places. Henry Cavill himself, Superman himself, is painting some custodies, trying to find out whether it's for 40k or heresy. I'm not sure that Henry Cavill's going to see my personal comment and reply to me, but if he does, whoop whoop, I'll get some information for you. But yeah, a lot of people taking this opportunity to do a lot of painting of models they already own. And let's face it, a lot of us own a lot of models that need painting. Some people struggling to get some hobby done in these times. In a weird way, it can be harder, particularly with people with kids and things like that. It can be harder to find that time to hobby or that motivation at times as well. And that's okay too. Don't be shamed by other people doing hobby. Everyone is in a different situation. So I've not done a lot. I ended up downloading a couple of computer games and playing them instead. But I'm trying to kickstart my hobby again, even just building some bits and pieces and getting some undercoats done. I haven't done a lot, but it's a step, and hopefully it's a bit windy outside. I don't know whether I'll be able to undercoat any more today, but building up to getting that airbrush out and getting some paint on some models. And working through my backlog, which was going to be my plan for 2020 anyway. We're over a quarter of the way through, and I've not done a lot, so I'm hoping that can expand on that a little bit. But yeah, these are interesting times, as we said. Each country is acting differently, has different issues around it. Everyone's suffering. The world's suffering. We need to. Please keep safe, people. Please follow the advice that you're given. If you don't think that advice is strong enough, then please feel free to go a little bit further with that as well. This is a hobby. This is something that is not as important as your family or anything like that, your health. But we do know that hobbies do help support mental health as well, which is just as important as your physical health. So don't feel ashamed for doing or not doing any hobby. Don't feel pressured into doing or not doing any hobby. Do what you need to do to help you out within the environments that you're in and the people you're around as well. There's a lot of support going on online that you can find. As I say, just in general support, not specific support in that respect. But this hobby for some people is helping out a lot during these times. So I'm certainly taking solace in what other people are doing, and in fact, in some ways, a lot of my socialising ends up being with people who are in other countries or other parts of the country. So I've had Zoom chats around the previews, as I mentioned earlier, which have been very good. I've been chatting to some people in America and various bits and pieces online through messengers, through chats, through video chats. And it's certainly helped me out, I know. And people who've been messaging the show for various things, it's been a little bit of that going on as well. And it's all helped me, I know that for sure. I do apologise for this episode being considerably late. We are going to try and move to the first of the month for the shows, because it just means if it is late, then it stays in the same month, which is just a little bit of a help for me. Makes me feel less bad as well. Going to try and get back onto track. As I say, the last just over a month been pretty messy. But, and this show is, at the end of the day, a hobby. So definitely want to keep it in its place as a hobby. It can't overtake my life. Job, family come first. And I hope you guys appreciate that, because that's the way it is going to be. But in the same instance, I want to keep doing it. I want to keep putting shows out. And I feel a responsibility, a level of responsibility to do so as well. I can't see me giving up podcasting for a while, much to probably my wife's chagrin. But, that's just the way it is. But I think I've probably gone into full waffle now, so I'm going to leave it there. And until next time, you have been listening to The Imperial Truth.